And the important thing is really that not every impulse requires an action, and not every critical comment requires an immediate answer. And also, it doesn't mean that a pause is passive. Sometimes it's really the most responsible action that you have available. Hi, and welcome to Lead Well. Imagine a situation, someone criticizes something you made, a decision you made. And before you have even fully understood what they're saying, you're already responding. You explain, you defend yourself, perhaps your voice becomes sharper, and often afterwards you realize, well, I could have handled that differently. This has happened pretty often to one of my coaching clients. She regularly used to respond very quickly to critical comments, and her immediate instinct is to defend her position because she feels attacked. But afterwards, she can often see the situation more clearly, and sometimes it's possible that she can repair the interaction and repair the relationship, but the first response always affected both herself and the person she was responding to. So the problem is really not that she doesn't know how to communicate. The problem was that under pressure, she couldn't access what she knew. She responded really sporadically. So the question is, how can we learn to create a pause before an automatic reaction takes over? During our conversation, I suddenly thought about impulse control training with dogs that I'm currently learning about. So the principle there is that when you train with a dog, especially puppies, you, for example, ask them to come back when you call them, like it's called the recall. And you do not begin in the most difficult environment. On the contrary, you start in a very manageable situation, calm environment at home where there is no distraction. And so the dog learns what you want them to do with very little distraction. And once the dog gets it in that safe environment and very calm environment, you can then add distractions. You can add the intensity of the distraction. And the repetition really makes the response more accessible, even when the level of the distraction rises. Now, when we bring that back into our lives, I'm not comparing humans to dogs, although I do think we have some things in common. I'm looking at this learning principle that we use very consistently in the dog training, but we often ignore it when it comes to our own behavior. And the thing is that we expect ourselves to respond calmly in the most emotionally charged situations, even though we probably have never practiced that response under easier conditions. So the thing is, we do not want to train ourselves to not have an impulse. We're training ourselves to not follow every impulse automatically. But let's look at what happens when someone criticizes us. Criticism can really be experienced as a social threat. So when someone tells me that something is not right about what I've been doing, I often take that as a personal criticism, as them saying that I am not good enough. There is a fundamental fear of every human being, and that is to be pushed out of the group. And this is something that comes up when criticism happens. It might also challenge your competence, your status, your belonging, and also fairness. You might feel, well, that was not right to say. And doesn't matter what the other person had been saying, what matters is how your body reacts, because your body prepares to protect you before you even consciously assess the situation. And for some people, protection looks like withdrawal. So they shy away, they probably shut down, don't say anything. And for others, it looks like an attack, contradicting, explaining, defending, or counter-criticizing. So if you criticize me, I find some flaws in you. And the saying, the attack is the best form of defense, is not only an attitude, it can become a really highly practiced stress response. So the stress response, because our mind, our body wants to protect us, explains the speed of the reaction. But it does not remove the responsibility for its impact. We expect our dogs to control their impulses. So we should also at least try to control them. But when we are in a stressed situation, what happens? Our attention narrows. We can only see what's stressing us out. We can only see the trigger. We can only hear the trigger. We can only think about what was just said. And nuancing, finding different perspectives becomes much harder. So we start to also listen for what's wrong rather than looking for things that might be even useful. And of course, we prepare our defense instead of trying to understand what the other person is telling us. And this moment, we are not really choosing a response. We are running a familiar pattern. So we do what we are used to doing in such a situation. Now, the interesting thing is that the same client has told me about the situation where she was able to respond differently. She was able to control her impulse. And that was a situation where she also received some critical comment. But at that time, she took a breath and did not respond immediately. And in the meantime, while she was pausing, another colleague answered. And so she realized that no response from her was necessary. The impulse felt urgent, but the situation was not. This was really an important learning for her because it showed that the ability was already there. She did not have to invent it. She only had to make it more reliable. So this ability to pause so that she could think again. And the important thing is really that not every impulse requires an action, and not every critical comment requires an immediate answer. And also, it doesn't mean that a pause is passive. Sometimes it's really the most responsible action that you have available. So what can you do there? Step one is really recognize your early warning signs, because your body will react. So if you want to interrupt an automatic response, you need to recognize this response before the words have left your mouth. So what does usually happen? Our body responds. There is tension in your jaw. Heat is building up in your face. You feel a pressure in your chest or stomach. You are holding your breath, or your heart starts beating faster, probably leaning forward, or maybe feeling this urge to interrupt. There might also be some thoughts like, this is not fair, this is not true, I can't let this stand, they don't understand, I have to correct this immediately. So think about the situation for a moment. What happens in your body during the 5 or 10 seconds before you become defensive, before you answer? And to be clear here, the body signal is not the problem. It can become your cue. It can become the helping signal because it tells you this is the moment to pause. Now, what can you do to pause? You can, of course, take a breath. And there is one type of breathing that really can help reduce the intensity of that moment very quickly in most cases. This is called the physiological sigh. And it has only been described in very recent years. It has been discovered and described in 2023. And it's similar to what we do when we are sobbing. When we're sobbing, we're like, and this is exactly what we do. And we use the nose to breathe in and our mouth to breathe out. So you do. So breathe in through your nose, take a second shorter breath in through your nose, and then breathe out slowly and completely through your mouth. This will not solve the conflict or give you an answer, tell you what to say, but it can reduce your physical activation enough to give you more choice. Because when your body is preparing you for fight, trying to find the perfect words is not even possible because your brain is so focused on what's going wrong here. So you first need to focus on regulating your state and then deal with the content. There is another step here that you can use because, as we said in dog training, we start in a very safe environment where there are no distractions or very little distractions. So what can you do here? You can prepare, because in a stressful moment, it's difficult to invent an elegant response. So you can prepare that before you need it, and you prepare it in a safe environment with no one being around, and you can come up with multiple possible sentences, like, I hear your point, but I'd like to think about it a little. Thank you for raising this. Let me consider before I respond. Or you can say, I don't want to answer too quickly. Can we return to this later? I even can say, I need a moment to understand what you're saying. So this is not to admit that the criticism is correct. This is really a decision for you to not respond from your defensive state, but take your time and give your brain the opportunity to think about the answer that you want to give. Of course, this pause must not become avoidance. So if you say you will return to the issue, then also return to it. And then you can train with increasing levels of difficulty. So this is where this training principle becomes really practical. You do not begin with the person which triggers you the most. You begin when answering to an email. So pause before answering a mildly irritating email. And then practice with a trusted colleague. Use a breath when receiving a small correction from someone. Practice the prepared sentence in a more uncomfortable conversation, maybe even a personal conversation, private conversation, and then gradually work towards the situations involving stronger criticism or higher stress. And sure, there will be situations that you are not yet fully prepared for, but I bet you are better prepared than in the past. If you try to practice when you are really emotional already, then you probably will not practice the right response. You probably will rehearse your pattern, your old reaction that you had. You could start a simple experiment this week. So for the next week, do not try to become perfectly calm. This will probably not work. Practice just one thing, one conscious breath between criticism and response. Or maybe even one conscious breath between anyone talking to you and you responding to them. Because sometimes it's so easy for us to jump into an answer rather than sitting and listening to them first. So this approach does not mean that you never feel defensive, but it means noticing your defensive response early enough so that you can regain choice. And I have a few questions with you. What type of criticism triggers you most quickly? What is the first sign that you can feel in your body? And which sentence could help you create that pause? And also, where could you practice under easier conditions this week? The space between a trigger and your response may feel very, very small at first. Perhaps it's only one breath. But that one breath can change your tone, your answer, and the experience of the person in front of you. And that is where great communication and leadership begins.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.